We talk a lot about fixing what's broken in our country. But what if the real work happens before the arguments ever begin? Today's conversation is about relationships, stories, and the quiet courage it takes to actually see one another again. If you've ever felt powerless, unheard, or disconnected in your own community, this is for you. Stick with me. Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate The Hate podcast. I'm your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. The Derate The Hate podcast is proudly produced in collaboration with Braver Angels, America's largest grassroots, cross-partisan organization working towards civic renewal. This podcast amplifies the mission that we share to foster a more respectful and united America where civic friendship thrives even when we disagree. Each week, through the power of story, conversation, and connection with incredible guests, we work to build bridges instead of barriers. Not to change minds on the issues, but to change how we see one another when we differ. Because, friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. So be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, share it with a friend, and visit braverangels.org to learn how you can get involved in the movement to bridge the partisan divide. Friends, I am so incredibly grateful that you have joined me for another powerful Derate The Hate episode. So let's get to it. Today I'm joined by Malka Kopell and Palma Strand, co-founders of Civity, for a conversation that gets to the core of how communities actually hold together. Malka and Palma have spent decades working in communities across the country, helping people solve real problems, not by debating harder, but by rebuilding relationships that have quietly broken down. We talk about why trust in institutions is failing, why so many people feel unseen or unheard, and why the answer isn't louder arguments, it's better connections. This is a conversation about storytelling, about listening with intention, and about what they call the conversation before the conversation. And maybe most importantly, it's about courageous citizenship, these small, everyday choices that help us rediscover and strengthen our civic muscle and remember that change doesn't start in Washington, it starts between two people willing to see each other as human again. Let's get into it with my friends Palma and Malka of Civity. Here we go. Malka Kopell and Palma Strand, thank you so much for joining me on the Derate The Hate podcast. I am so grateful to see both of you all today.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So a few months back, I was able to meet Palma at a bridging event in Mount Vernon, where we came together for the Listen First Coalition of bridging organizations, who's just been doing great work to bring together a lot of us that work in this bridge building space. And that was the first time I got to find out a little bit about the organization Civity. And Palma and I got to talk a little bit there in Mount Vernon. And then she said that she'd like me to meet you, Malka. And I thought, what better way to find out more about the organization Civity and how you all decided to get this thing started than to have you here on the Derate The Hate podcast. So very grateful to have you both here. And one thing that I really like to do is find out, what the story is behind the story, what brought people into this bridging space. A lot of people don't even know that the bridging space, the depolarization space is a thing, but I always like to find out first why people do it and what brought them here. What was the kind of genesis of their journey into bridge building. So Malka, I want to start with you. I know a little bit about Palma, but I want to start with you and find out a little bit about your story. What brought you to the bridge building space, this kind of depolarization work that a lot of us do, and then how that led to the formation of Civity.
Great. Happy to. And it's really, Wilk, I want to say that I really, as part of the big bridge building space, really appreciate the work that you do. And Derate the Hate is really something we need because we need to change the story out there. So thank you for doing that. I started I started kind of this work, or I came to this work. Most of my professional life, I've been a community organizer slash community facilitator slash conflict resolution facilitator. And I've worked in communities around the country for many years and started this conversation with Palma probably 20-ish years ago when I was a program officer at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Palma was doing work in her community in Virginia. And we started a conversation about kind of how do communities solve problems, and what do we need what do they need to make that problem solving process better. And we really focused in on the relationships between people in a lot of these processes, relationships that may be great or they may need a little fixing or a little better connection. And started Civity about a dozen years ago now to support leaders in communities on the relationship building, on trust building, helping people see each other and connect with each other across all different kinds of differences, everything from economics to race to geography to religion and politics, you name it.
Yeah, relationship building, trust building. As we think about the age that we're in right now, I mean, obviously, institutional trust is at an all-time low. Trust in each other seems to be on the decline. So relationships are going to be a huge part of that in rebuilding that trust. So Palma, then, talk to me a little bit about your journey into this bridge building space, and that conversation that you had with Malka so many years ago, and kind of how that translated into this bigger thing for you then.
Thanks. And as Malka said, it's great to be here. These stories of how to connect are and the possibility of connecting are so important. So I'm a lawyer and a conflict person by training, but that is actually not how I came to this work. As Malka said, when my kids were little, I was doing some work in my community on some fairly contentious issues involving the public schools where my kids were. And I kind of was in the middle of it, and I had this kind of lawyer frame about how things work. And then over time, I started to realize, this is not how things work, that things really work through relationships. And that when people were in relationship, particularly with people who were different from them, in the schools, people were different in terms of race, in terms of language, in terms of economics, in terms of geography. And when people kind of had those connections, then things, it wasn't like things stopped being contentious, but things moved forward. Mm-hmm. And when people were not in those kind of relationships, things just got stuck.
Yeah.
And so that kind of very practical on the ground observation is what led me to kind of initiate this particular, conversation with Malka about how do things work, and how can we maybe help things work better? Relationships are something that we create. They're not something that come from the outside. And so it's something that people in communities can really do to make their communities work better. And, I think, even though we're both head people, we're both very practical people. And this sort of question of, okay, so we know that this matters, how can we help make it happen is really where we started from.
Yeah, I mean, I love that question, right? I mean, how do communities solve problems? I mean, it seems like a basic question, but a lot of people, if they sit down and think about it, and it, especially in the divided times that we live in today. It's we have to we cannot ignore our local community problems to just continuously focus on all the catastrophic or so-called catastrophic perceived problems that there are everywhere else. We in our communities, and especially now, and this is a great question, because one of the things that I think about a lot right now, and especially in Braver Angels, one of the big things that we're talking about is courageous citizenship. What does courageous citizenship mean? How do we engage with each other in our communities? I mean, it really starts with starts with ourselves as individuals, then how we can take that into our communities, and then from our communities to a larger and more national level. And when I think about some of the things that I've seen that you guys do at Civity and things like that, I think about one of the things that I hear a lot in the work that I do is people feel powerless. They feel powerless to affect change. One of the reasons that they feel powerless is because they don't feel heard. It's these relationships have broken down to the point where people forget how to solve the problems within their community. And a lot of that, you're right, stems from the breakdown in relationships. But we, in this multicultural, pluralistic society that we live in today, have to learn how to rebuild those relationships. And then it doesn't seem so difficult to solve those problems. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. Malka, I'll start with you. Thinking about, how do we rebuild those relationships? I saw something about bridging and bonding and the difference between those there. So let's dive into that a little bit.
Sure, I'll start, Palma, then feel free to chip in. But I think, Wilk, what you said, we're a national organization, but we work in communities, and communities are really where it's happening, and where people are already in relationship with each other because they live near each other. They'll see each other at the grocery store. Maybe their kids play soccer together, and there's a lot of hope at the community level. So we work with community leaders, as I said, who are that they're deeply involved in trying to make their communities better. And so what we offer is, a reminder that the relational part of community problem solving is a really important part. Sometimes we call our work the conversation before the conversation. So, before people can sit down and, get into the head stuff about about the important issues, they need to see each other as people, as human beings who live in their community. And that's really the piece that we focus on. And I think the piece that gives me the most hope.
Yeah, the relationship building definitely is something. I don't know, when I see people coming together, it gives me hope too. And I think that's one of the things that people today, I don't think see enough of, or they just don't focus enough on. And I want to take that into a different spot. But first I want to have Palma talk a little bit about that too, that relationship building and what that means for our communities, again, in this multicultural, pluralistic society that we live in today. How do we build those relationships, and how does that translate into real community action and solving community problems?
Yeah, no, I think that is really, to me, that's really the million-dollar question at this point. And, earlier, Wilk, you said rebuild these relationships. And then just now you said build these relationships. And I think that's actually a really important thing to remember, is that in this kind of multicultural society that we're living in, we haven't always had those relationships in a way that's like, oh, you're, a fellow member of my community and everybody matters. And so, to some extent, we're kind of rebuilding our communities, but with a different group of people, with a more diverse group of people, with people who, may have historically not been included in the communities that were making decisions and that were building, and consequently decisions may not have really worked for them. And so this project that we're engaged in, to me is both a really necessary project, but it's also a really exciting project. I mean, the US is is a place of so many different people and so many different, there's just this energy, and to be able to kind of tap into that and bring everybody in it's more important than ever. And the relationships across difference, politics is what everybody focuses on, but some of these other differences like race and religion are very deep seated, and to really kind of connect across those differences is both important for us, holistically, but it's also really, really rewarding, from a personal point of view. We're all interested in people, and, connecting with people who are different than us, that we're kind of back away from a lot of the time, can be really, just really wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah, the connecting across differences. It's a phrase that we hear quite often, and this is kind of where I wanted to take this, because, well, there's something I want to get to. The who is the we question is something I've also seen, which stands out to me as something that's hugely important. But the one thing that I wanted to say when we think about connecting across differences and the things that we hear. You talked about, marginalized communities or people who are there, but they don't feel like they're truly represented in a lot of the conversations. That's, again, going to the thing that I said before, the not feeling heard, the feeling unseen, the feeling powerless. That's a huge problem, right? And I do love, Palma, when you talk about the excitement of building a relationship with somebody who's different than you and things like that. I mean, it's always exciting for me when I obviously have a lot of these conversations, working in this space and having done this podcast for several years now. But when I meet somebody new or find out something new about somebody that, I never knew before, or they present something to me that, I never really thought of it that way, because my lived experience is not the same as their lived experience. I think that's all very exciting. But one of the things that we see in our media today, in our politics today, and the ugliness of discourse, and we're made to focus it, whether it be our social media feeds or the mainstream media or the politicians with the loudest and the most cantankerous voices out there. They focus on the bad things within a community and then pretend that represents the whole community, or different things like that. And then we have this reticular activating system, right? Where if that's what we see, that's what our perception is. Now we are focused on that as being them. Get into a little bit, and I'll go back to you, Palma, and then have Malka comment on this too. But the who is the we question, getting to the we versus the us versus them, I think is a huge portion of this, so that we don't just see them as the worst examples that we're being presented with. That misperception and that perception gap, something I've talked about with James Cohn from More Like Us, is a big problem. But talk to me about who is the we.
So, the us versus them is, and I did a blog on this not that long ago. It's really problematic. It's, it's like, it's very malleable. It's like, well, the us changes, the them changes. It's very kind of artificial. It's also very kind of instrumental in the sense that it sort of divides and conquers people. So it's like, so might be a reason why people want to, people to feel us versus them. But I think that, the kind of the fundamental thing that we've really discovered is that when people, and I totally agree with you about social media and the ways that people kind of get into that us versus them space. But what we've found is that when you put people actually in like person to person, face to face conversation with someone, then then you're just two people, and you are kind of a nucleus of a we. and regardless of the differences. And we can talk a little bit about kind of the effectiveness of this. I'll just start, and Malka can probably continue. We participated in this Stanford Strengthening Democracy Challenge a few years ago, where the researchers were looking at how to combat, partisan animosity, this kind of the affective part of polarization. And they put a call out for 8-minute, which is very short, 8-minute or less online interventions. And we submitted one that kind of gives people a little bit of the experience of the one-on-one conversations that we do. We call it the Civity storytelling intervention. Right. It's all about stories. And they had 252 submissions. They picked 25 to test. Ours was one of them. And ours came up number one in reducing social distrust, speaking of trust. But the key here to really, and a lot of them were also quite effective. The key here is that it really doesn't take much to invite people into the we.
That's right.
Kind of space, right? I mean, we have this sense like we're all programmed to be us versus them. And one of the things that this study showed is that it's like we also have that we part going on in our head. And all we have to do is kind of invite people into that we space. And it doesn't take much, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Not a lot. So there's a lot of room for not getting into that, we're just doomed. It's like, this is just who we are. And, there's no way out of it. Yeah.
No, that's right. That's right. Malka, I would like you to expand on that because
Sure.
This is a topic that can't be promoted enough, is that, that I love that it's just, two people are the nucleus of a we. Expand on that for me, would you? Because I think it's hugely important.
Yeah. We get discouraged because we think, the problem is too big. It's our country, and it's this huge system. But the system, and you said this before, Wilk, it's made up of individuals. It comes down to the individuals. That's who the we is. It's a bunch of individuals. It's a bunch, and we created the system as it is today, and created our culture, and we can change it, one conversation at a time, truly. And I think what Palma talked about, the Stanford study with over 30,000 study participants were in that study. And after looking at the interventions, it changed, those interventions changed how people felt, not only about one other person, but about a group of people. So Palma said our intervention was a Civity storytelling intervention, basically people speaking into a camera, one by one, talking about themselves, not talking about their politics, but talking about who they were, their community, their family, their interests. And yet that moved the needle on how people felt about people from the other party.
Yeah.
Just hearing people's non-political stories, actually. And so I think that the nice thing about us taking a systems view is that the we is made up of connections between individuals. It is possible to change the we, and I think that's really a big part of our work, and your work too is again helping people see a different story of who we are.
Yeah, and we can take that to the next step, because the power of storytelling, it's huge, and it's huge in the work that I do, and I know it's in the work that y'all do as well. Is the power of storytelling, and to your point, Malka, the when people are asked to speak about themselves, and I mean everybody loves. There's always exceptions to everybody, right?
Loves.
But I mean, especially when we live in this age where we are in the most connected age in human history, but people feel more alone than they've ever felt. You have to ask yourself why. And when the question is never asked, why do you feel this way about this, or what about your life experience has led you to believe what you believe? The whole storytelling thing again, cannot be overstated, because when people get that opportunity to say why they believe what they believe, and they know somebody else is actually listening, not just to what they believe, but why they believe it. So let's take that to the next level for me, Malka, and talk more about that storytelling aspect of it and how important that begins, or that part of this recipe, so to speak, is. Because when we get to tell our story, and again, it doesn't take long, but when we get to tell our story, we open up to the idea of hearing other people's stories as well. So let's expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, and you put your finger on it. Well, people love telling their story and love being listened to, and it's the listening part is so important in this, right? We do workshops, and we've had people, kind of give people a chance to tell their stories, finding common ground, connecting across difference. And what we've heard is, even from people who have told their stories before, what they appreciate is that knowing that someone else was listening, because we asked them to, right? And they took turns listening to each other's stories. So that's an important, it doesn't even matter what the story is. Having someone go through an experience of, hi, this is me. And at the other end of that experience is that other person is still there listening to them. That is it's such a wonderful experience. I mean, I sometimes reflect on kind of, how I came to this work from way back. And it really started when I was a kid, and a shy kid who wanted to be included and learn the power of not only talking to someone else, one other person, but listening to their story, the power of including someone else. And really, all we're trying to do in our work is to let people know what power they already have.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, and this is a big thing that we're talking about at Braver Angels a lot too, is helping people recapture that sense of lost agency. And what better way to show a person that they still have agency than to ask them what their story is. Palma, dive into that a bit for me, because when we talk about people's stories and asking people, again, not just what they believe, but why they believe it. What is your life experience? What about your life experience brought you to this point that you believe this about this thing, or you believe this about those people? And when we start to ask people, and they say, there are people listening to me, these people really want to know my story. That does bring us back to the.
Yeah. So a couple of things, we started talking about storytelling, and we've actually moved to talking about story sharing, because the listening part is so important. And, our culture really highlights talking, free speech and talk. And we don't really highlight listening. And listening is the most powerful gift. And we do a lot of our work in, we do groups, but, as you experienced at the Mount Vernon session, we divide people into one-on-one pairs, where you, when you tell your story, you really have that other person's presence and attention. And when you are listening to someone's story, you are really fully listening to what they have to say. And as you pointed out, Wilk, it's not about like what you think. The point of this conversation is not getting to agreement. The point of this conversation is just like, who are you as a person, and a little bit of how you got to where you are and the person that you are today. And that kind of, we think of storytelling and listening as kind of an exchange of gifts. Yeah. It's like I give you the gift of my story, or you give me the gift of your story, and then the other person gets the gift of their listening, which is truly a gift. And you talk about sort of empowering people, as Malka said, like listening to someone or taking the risk of kind of sharing a little bit of your story to invite them to tell their story is such an empowering thing. And, we've been on this Civity journey for for quite some time now. And so it's, we do it in our work, but it also filters out, as I'm sure you've experienced too, it filters out into the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah.
And approaching people with this sense of, you have a story. I don't have time to hear everyone's story, but this sense of everyone has a story. And if I'm interacting with them, to approach them with that sense of there's a story there.
Yeah.
Really changes how you interact with people on an everyday basis. And it's so within our power to do all the time, every day.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There really isn't space, kind of natural space in our society for this kind of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
The space needs to be created, especially in the civic space, right? Not so with people who are, our nearest and dearest, or family and friends, but out in the kind of working world, the civic world, the problem-solving world. No time for chit chat. Got to make things happen. And so we encourage the leaders that we work with who have spaces, who have problem-solving spaces. They have meetings, they have gatherings, they have public meetings. We encourage them to introduce the opportunity, the space for that kind of interaction in their own meetings. Hey, before we get to the next item on our agenda, how about taking 10 minutes, finding someone that you don't know, and share your story and listen to theirs. That is so easy to do, but does not happen naturally, and it changes everything.
No, that's absolutely right. And we live in this cycle where it's boom, boom, boom. We got to have results. We got to have, we've got to constantly be moving to make things happen. And you're so right, Malka, when you say that it interferes with our ability to. And this is something I think I've heard you guys say, but I know it's something that we talk about in the circles that I run in, is rebuilding that, or not rebuilding, but strengthening that civic muscle, right? Mm-hmm. Strengthening that civic muscle, just like anything else, takes constant exercise. Being able to, and then going back to the listening thing, Palma, I call it listening with intention. And then I tie this right back to the whole thing about courageous citizenship, right? People think that it just takes courage to be able to speak in front of people or to talk. But a lot of times courage means having the courage to listen with intention, listen to things that you may disagree with or may make you feel uncomfortable, but listening with intention anyway, because you want to intentionally find out more about that person that you're having that conversation with. These things are so incredibly important. They're all interwoven into each other to, again, help to strengthen that civic muscle. If we don't make time, or we don't find circles where we can have the time to engage in those listening sessions and those working sessions, or those civic muscle workout sessions, we forget who the other people are. We forget what that we is. So as we round out our time here, there's so much more we can talk about. But as we round out our time here, Malka and Palma, let's just talk about, just briefly kind of sum up, how does Civity produce those tangible results that people are looking for? We are all so busy, and we don't know, how to effectively spend our time. How can people, whether it be daily, weekly, whatever cadence they feel comfortable doing, but what is some, intentional action somebody can take to find that tangible result for the effort they're putting in? Because we are looking for results, but sometimes, number one, a lot of people don't even know the bridge building space is a thing, and they should, because far too often people just have lost the sense that there are organizations out there trying to bring us together. What's something that Civity is doing, and what's something that people can use as an action to find the tangible results that we're all looking for? Let's start with Malka, and then we'll round out with Palma.
Okay. So one thing that people can do is have a conversation with someone that they don't know that well, maybe not sure about. Take a little bit of a risk, because you will get something back. And that conversation will change you, it will change the other person, and it will change our culture. We have a portal on our website, www.civity.org, that's called DIY Civity. And it has a bunch of exercises and tips, including from many of our partners in the bridge building field, about what you can do. But I just want to say that, you can do it.
Mm-hmm. And Palma, give the DTH listeners some quick actions that they can do to find those tangible results, and then we'll give the website out again, civity.org. But yeah, round us out here.
So remember that the tangible result here is just building a relationship. Like, that's it. It's not changing the world. It's building a relationship, which does have the effect ultimately of changing things. But so think about, we call them Civity brushes. You get onto an elevator. There's somebody you don't know. They're wearing a scarf that looks kind of cool. And you say to them, wow, I love that scarf. And it's like all of a sudden that person is like, oh, there's a person here. They noticed me. They saw me. That's a Civity brush. It says, hello, hi, you're another person. I see you. You walk down the street. There's an unhoused person who's just sitting there looking up, and you say, hello. I saw you. You're there. You're a person. You're in my community. And as Malka said, those are just like tiny little things that you can do every single day. Also have a conversation with somebody. And I do want to pick up something that Malka mentioned, this idea of risk, which I think your courageous citizenship really acknowledges. One of the things that we say to people is, this is a little different than the way we're kind of programmed, socialized to operate, particularly in spaces that aren't about family and friends. We're programmed to kind of walk on by, those sort of blinders, or not be curious, not get into those spaces. It's a little risky.
Yeah.
But we've also found that if you say to people, this is a little risky, but you can do this.
Yeah. Yep.
That people really respond. And the reward, the tangible result, is how people reciprocate.
Yeah.
When somebody says, smiles back or shares their story with you, that creates a connection. That's incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. There is some risk, but there is great reward. So many great things in this conversation, Malka and Palma. There's a grocery store around here that runs an ad that says the shortest distance between two people is a smile. And I love that. I love that phrase, and it just, what you said there, Palma, just brought that up for me. I've got an episode, I've talked about it several times, how smiles and bad moods are contagious, so we should choose wisely. I love the idea of these Civity brushes, and so much greatness here in this conversation. Malka, Kopell, Palma Joy, Strand, Civity.org is the website. Everybody can find out more about both of y'all in the show notes for this episode. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so very much for joining me here on Derate The Hate.
Thank you, Wilk.
Thanks, Wilk. It's always inspiring to see people and meet people and talk to people who are doing the work to make things better in our community. Thanks so much.
Very good. Thank you both. Friends, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to get the Derate The Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. We really are better together. So please take a moment to visit braverangels.org and consider joining the movement towards civic renewal and bridging our political divides. This is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make every day the day that you want it to be. With that, my friends, I'm going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.